Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello, and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we're going to enter into a conversation that will probably go through a few episodes. But I think it's really important. Just to start off, I want to first of all thank everybody who has supported this show as it continues to grow and our guests continue to rise up and be interesting and informational and riveting. And the subscriber content continues. More subscribers have been coming in, and I just want to thank everybody for that. This is a dream of mine to build a community based on our goal to be healthy, and it's happening. And the podcast is a part of it. So I'm really excited. For those of you who don't know, I am the CEO of Gardens of Hope, a 501c3 nonprofit that provides therapeutic horticulture and education to those in need. We're based out of Paris, California. We've got a 2.5 acre botanical garden and small farm, and we teach permaculture techniques, all sorts of healing modalities or practice here, retreats, and all sorts of good stuff. And that's sort of the hub of this healing community. And I welcome you to investigate, come on out, take a tour, or just maybe set up your own little garden of hope at your place. Lately, my brain's been getting clearer and clearer. I have finished my third round of chemotherapy, and hopefully I won't need any more of that. My cancer battle is prevalent in this podcast, but we're starting to shift into more open-ended conversations about different things and solving problems and finding answers. A lot of this is about getting to the core of what makes things happen. You know, we have problems with Western medicine because generally it's symptomatic. It doesn't generally go after the core of a problem, and it covers up symptoms, and you end up with, these drug cocktails of so many medicines to combat the side effects of the first medicine, and on and on and on, and cascading effects and problems and short-sightedness, and not ever really getting to the root cause of things. And so today I want to talk a little bit about motivation. And as my brain's getting a little clearer, I'm thinking more and more about really health and what does it mean, and why are we even seeking it, and what causes people to do the things they do. And so first of all, I typically will look at myself when I'm asking a question like this, because that's the one thing I can know. And so, for example, today I'm going to be meeting with my medical oncologist to go over a plan. And it's going to be a Zoom meeting, and I'm going to record it, and it'll be featured in a subscriber episode so that you can hear firsthand how this goes and how somebody can communicate with a physician instead of just going, okay, 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 whatever you say, or being combative and saying, I won't do it. Trying to find a practical solution to complicated problem. And this doctor wants to go forward with radiation and chemotherapy as a follow-up to the chemotherapy I've already had. And the primary tumor is basically gone. We're going to go over the recent CT scan I got, and I will listen to what she has to say. But I've prepared a pretty involved presentation and series of questions to hopefully get her to see things my way. And my way is simply that I want the most amount of good with the least amount of harm in the long term to my body when it comes to solving this cancer problem. And that's a pretty straightforward motivation. And the things that she's proposing to do have a very clear risk of causing more cancer. And so to me, I think, why would I do that when her fear is that the cancer is going to come back? And okay, well, maybe if it does, then we go and treat it again instead of let's go ahead and do a thing that will likely cause more cancer in the future. And then I got to have to deal with that. So, anyways, for those of you who are interested or are subscribers, I would encourage you to listen to that because it should be pretty interesting. So motivation, that is a simple, straightforward motivation. I want the most good to be for my body and the least amount of harm. I would have to say that for me, that's a motivation for many things I do, and not just my body, but my mind, my spirit. There are sometimes I'll do things that push the boundaries of what, let's just say, normal people might do or want to do. And I think if we're wise, we'll weigh out the risks and the benefits and or at least potential benefits and make a decision based on those things. Um, so that's sort of the beginning of this motivation. So I would say, what causes people to want to pursue health? And in thinking about this, I really came up with a lot of motivations. And I thought to myself, well, it's going to be a bit of a conversation. So we'll probably go into a couple of different episodes talking about this because there's just a lot of information that I want to get into. And I think the first thing would be a motivation. I think a sense of purpose is an important factor in motivation. So, for example, what I've noticed, especially in now talking to more and more people that have had cancer or do have cancer or other life-threatening illnesses, is that a sense of purpose is, I believe, a motivating factor. In fact, I'm certain of it, but it's critical. And what I've learned, and I struggled with this with the cannabis side of things for a long time because in making cannabis oil and offering it to people who I knew I could help if they were just to take it. But I also know that it's a difficult task to take that much cannabis oil. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. And it kind of blew my mind the first time somebody told me, I just can't do it. It's too much. And I thought to myself, wow, so you're willing to risk dying instead of just being really stoned for a while. And when I began my cancer journey, that was the first thing I did is I started taking my own oil, and it was rough, but I never questioned it. I just did it because I love my life and I have huge purpose in my life, and I want nothing more than to have a long and fulfilled life with the best quality I can afford. And apparently, that's not something that everybody shares. And so, and I could see, as my cancer was progressing and it was really sucking the life out of me, and all of the things I was trying to do to solve it were just overwhelming. And really, there were times when thought to myself, I can see how somebody would let go and just say, man, I just can't do this anymore, and just let go. And especially if you're not afraid of death, it's like, which I'm not, it's like, well, I could see it. And I actually had to reel myself in one time, not because I was depressed or anything. I was just exhausted, and all the things I had to keep track of every single day, and just in an effort to stay alive, and I could feel myself sort of floating downward and going, wow, I could just let go and just float away. And I had to reel myself back in. So I think a sense of purpose is hugely important. And I think that if you're considering making a change or taking an aggressive action towards or against a thing, whether it's a disease or a condition like obesity, or there's just so many bad relationship or any number of things that are going to be a difficult task. I think having a clear sense of purpose is important. So some people, it's your own life. For me, that was simple. Some people, it's a spouse or family member, children, even who knows, maybe even pets and animals. I can't let them down. Maybe that's a good sense of purpose. Some people, it's more than that. It's like with me, I believe I have a gift and a tool to help people find their way and find answers and find their best version of themselves and find their healthy life. And that means mentally, spiritually, physically, all of those things. And I believe I've got the ability to do that, and it's starting to happen. And people are starting to find me, and I'm able to interact, and I'm watching positive benefits happen. And so eventually, we'll have a nice consulting service built up, and the Gardens of Hope will be thriving. We'll have sessions going on every day, and retreats and all these things happening, and in such a meaningful way that will fulfill the dream that I have of that. But meanwhile, the purpose is simple. We just keep going in towards these goals. Uh, there are so many different types of sense of purpose that one person could have, that I just think it's important to pay attention to that and maybe look and see, do I have one? Or am I just floating, drifting in life?
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
So another motivation is, longevity. That ties to the sense of purpose, but specifically, I want to live a long life. That's something I want, so therefore it would make sense to go after a healthy lifestyle. The more healthy you are, probably the longer you're going to live. And, they've got all sorts of anti-aging tools nowadays, and they range from, compounds, supplements, practices, all sorts of different things to increase longevity. And if that is your purpose, I think that you can accomplish it even with a small amount of effort. And I would encourage you to do that simply because I think everybody should live a long and healthy life. Another sense of purpose might be to remove a problem. So, for example, I found out I had cancer. So my renewed sense of purpose was I need to remove that cancer from my body and replace it with a fully restored, genetically reset, healthy body. And so that's a huge task, a huge sense of purpose, and frankly, a lifetime of work. It doesn't really go away. Once you've found that you have this, you have a likelihood of getting it again. So you've got to keep solving that problem. Um, and I think sometimes a condition that could cause health problems, such as obesity, weight management, is a huge motivation. Um, I know that my healthy journey or my journey to health has ebbed and flowed over the years. When I was young, I was into fitness. I liked my body. I liked the way I looked and felt. I worked hard. I physically toiled to make money as a kid. I used to run long distance, or well, for me it was long distance, but I used to run and I used to work out and I used to, again, just work hard in the garden. And I, paid attention to my physique and my health and my abilities. I also had a lung disease that I've struggled with all my life. So that was another factor in this, was mitigating that. And ultimately, that's what led me to studying herbs and natural medicine, and becoming a formulator was my desire. My motivation was I didn't want the Western medical treatments anymore. I didn't want the allergy tests and allergy shots and medicines that made me feel all weird, and the trips to the emergency room and all of those things. I didn't want that anymore. And so I began studying herbs and growing them and formulating. And that was a clear motivation. Um, when my father died about 8 years ago, at one point I reflected and I realized that he was overweight by a lot, at least 50 pounds, probably more than that. He had heart disease from a fairly young age, from younger than I am right now. So when my dad was my age, he had already had a heart episode and a bypass, and ultimately he got diabetes, more than likely from his weight. He had sleep apnea, which I also had, or probably still have, but I manage it now. But he wouldn't treat it. He wouldn't handle it. He had a very stressful life. And I looked at myself. Now, remember, if you know or don't know, he was a surgeon and had a lifetime of medical training, and he knew better. He knew the things he did were likely to cause him harm, and he did them anyways. He didn't have a motivation to avoid those things. He rathered to do those things than to avoid them for whatever reason. Um, and when he passed, I was there with him when he passed, and that's a pretty powerful experience to share with somebody. And sometime after, I realized, I looked at myself and I said, "Holy shit, I'm gonna be him pretty soon if I don't do something about it." And I began a journey of starting out with weight loss. I was a good 50 pounds overweight. And initially, my motivation was my daughter. She was getting married and she said, "Hey, Dad, why don't we lose 20 pounds?" And I said, "Oh, okay, let's make it interesting. And let's make a bet." And I bet her a chunk of money that I would lose the weight before she would. And I did. I whooped her ass. And that was my motivation. I knew that I'm a pretty competitive person and that if I put myself in a position where I was going to be directly competing with somebody, I would give it more effort. And once I got that first 20 pounds off and I began learning about food and really working on my diet, my nutritional intake, I saw results. And when I saw results, I got more motivated. And ultimately, I lost 50 pounds and managed to maintain it. And sort of what I did is I set a line. And if I crossed that line, I had to fast until I got back below that line. And that was my deal I made with myself. And subsequently, when I got cancer and I took on a even more rigid diet, I ended up losing a whole lot more weight than that. And with this diet I'm at right now, it's very difficult to get weight, but keep it on. But I'm slowly building it back. I have sort of the opposite problem now. It's easy to drop weight with this diet that I'm on, and difficult to gain it. So that sort of weight management is a good sense of purpose. And that ties into, let's say, disease prevention. We decide we want to be healthy and avoid, I don't want diabetes. My grandma had diabetes. I have a genetic predisposition to it. Now I'm motivated to keep cancer out of my body, and I've learned a lot of tools and techniques to do that. And so it's a great motivation. Some diseases you can't do anything about in the sense of, genetic um, diseases, MS, and a lot of different diseases that are just a genetic flaw. And if you get them, whatever, there's a treatment, or maybe there isn't, or there are things you can do to mitigate your problem, but you can't necessarily avoid it. But many diseases are avoidable. STDs are totally avoidable if you have safe practices. Diabetes, again, a huge one. There's heart disease, there's genetic factors to it, but certainly your health practices are going to be a big factor in this. And so I think keeping your body healthy, avoiding diseases, avoiding ailments that could be prevented, having a good long life, a sense of purpose, all of that, I think, is some powerful and primary motivations for being healthy. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to this to consider any of those three as a challenge, as a goal. Think about that for yourself. And if not, maybe question and find out why. Like, if you don't feel motivated to live a long life, well, why? Maybe examine that and maybe figure out that you've got some mental, spiritual issues that you need to deal with, and maybe that'll take you down that road. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I've got a lot more material to cover, so this will probably go 2 or 3 or 4 episodes in the motivation of being healthy. So thank everybody who supported the show. And remember, you can leave a comment, you can leave a review. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, reach out. I'm glad to book you. I love to have these conversations. And let's find our way to health, folks. It's been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast, and we will see you next time. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.